Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. This morning we're going to be presenting an update on those 31 Patriot Front flunkies who got themselves arrested in Idaho a few days back. The police chief of Coeur d'Alene is Lee White, appropriately named, and according to him, there's been a very strong reaction to his department rounding up these racist rascals. It seems that not everyone is so grateful that the boys in blue actually did their job. The police, including the chief himself, have been getting a lot of death threats and threats to dox them. I wonder if anyone's threatened to have them swatted. Death threats being sent to the police. How absolutely outrageous! And just how serious are the Coeur d'Alene Police Department taking all this? Well, it doesn't seem like they're taking it that seriously. Now, according to the white guy, 50% of the calls they've been getting have been praise from the community, and the rest have been the death threats and other forms of pointed harassment. So half the calls they've been getting have been death threats is what that means. And they're not making a big deal about that. Oh, they're not saying this is outrageous. We got to get the Department of Justice, the State Attorney General's office, and hunt these scoundrels down. What got me is the white guy said the majority of the threats being made appear to be from outside the Coeur d'Alene community. So what that means is they've also been getting a number of calls from inside their community. But nonetheless, the kind of trash who are sending the police these death threats are the same people who were at the January 6th insurrection, the same kind of people who were waving back the blue and back the badge flags. Interesting how nobody ever draws those connections. They just act as if these guys are mutually exclusive when they're actually the exact same people. Now, the police in Coeur d'Alene are learning the same thing that the Capitol Hill police learned 18 months ago. You can't compare the people saying defund the police with the white supremacists who are saying kill the police. Yeah, moments like this kind of puts things in proper perspective now, don't it? And speaking of perspectives, obviously the trash over at Fox News, they're not making too big a deal out of this either. In fact, they seem to be mostly annoyed that this happened at all, annoyed that they actually have to speak on it. One of Fox's on-air Klansmen, some creep named Peter Hegseth, said that he wanted to know why the police couldn't arrest all those BLM protesters.
Police say they learned about the U-Haul from a tipster who reported the men loading into the truck in the parking lot of a hotel. Back to you guys.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. I just want to know how many BLM riots were prevented because we got in on the inside before they rioted, burned down cities.
Very interesting.
Never ahead of that curve.
Never. Never.
As usual, whenever the subject is something that Fox News doesn't want to have to report on, they always shoehorn in the mention of black somehow, doesn't matter what it is. And of course, being Fox News, they don't say that these guys are white supremacists, they don't call them terrorists or even radicals, it just says dozens arrested. As if these guys perhaps were just some group of vagrants who were passing through town. No mention of their white supremacist ties, no mention of their organized violence at all. Yeah, they know that when their racist audience is feeling uncomfortable about something, just mention, well, what about those black people? But what about? I guess it makes sense, though, that Fox News would be extra salty about this story, because that's 31 Fox News viewers who just wound up in the pokey for a couple of days. 31 of their viewers are in jail, so their ratings are taking a hit until these guys can get themselves bailed out. Too bad these clowns already blew all their money on meth, otherwise they'd be out of the hoosgow by now. But there's also been a lack of outrage from people who you would think ought to be more angry about this, like the white media, for instance. But also the police. The police unions, they're not up in arms over this. Same way there was also a lack of outrage about all the cops who got beat up and even died as a result of the January 6th insurrection. You would think that there would be police from coast to coast who would be demanding laws, demanding punishment. Nah, they were real quiet after that. It was the wrong people who showed up at the January 6th insurrection. They were the wrong color. Where were all the blowhards like Patrick Lynch and other domestic terrorists to call out the orange man last year and say that Trump had blood on his hands? No, the police unions don't seem to be concerned about police getting beaten up or killed at all, even en masse, so long as the people who are doing it are not black. Perhaps it was because, as we all know, a lot of the insurrectionists were themselves retired or even active duty police. No honor among thieves. These white supremacist groups like Oath Keepers and Proud Boys brag about how they've got active duty police in their terrorist organization. Perhaps Chief White should start his investigation with his own police department. In fact, the police in Coeur d'Alene arrested the leader of Patriot Front, Thomas Rousseau, so now they can ask him how many of the cops in the department are in league with him. An attorney for one of the Patriot Front terrorists said that Patriot Front did not have a reputation for violence. Now, I explained to you on Sunday how Patriot Front used to be called Vanguard America, and how not only do these guys have a reputation for violence, they were present at the Charlottesville riot in 2017, but one of Vanguard America's members, James Fields, was the one who drove the car that plowed into the anti-racist protesters in Charlottesville, murdering Heather Heyer. So much for no reputation for violence. I guess this guy's playing weasel words. Well, Vanguard America had a reputation for violence, but they've since rebranded themselves, and well, you can't say Patriot Front does. And of course, nobody in the white media does any fact-checking on this, so they just let these guys say that stuff and just waltz off. That's why you need the black media. We're doing the job that the white media refuses to do. Now, all of this happened because Patriot Front wanted to make a statement in Coeur d'Alene because of the gay pride parade that was going on there, and Patriot Front thought that it'd be a good opportunity for them to show some white pride. And if this tactic sounds familiar, it should. It's the exact same thing that the white right has done with these right-wing think tanks staging their phony crisis actors at these small school boards in deep red areas, where they go there and threaten the school board. They make sure to invite the media to video all of this, and they scream and yell that the schools are treating white students unfairly when they know it's all a pack of lies. They target small places because they figure this is going to give them the ability to do whatever they want without any sort of substantive opposition. According to the police, though, in Coeur d'Alene, they got a 911 call from a tipster who alerted them to a little army of people with masks and shields running around in a U-Haul truck. And the police caught those terrorists 10 minutes later and arrested them all. I want you to think about that. Between the time they got the call and the time that they were finally rounding these clowns up, 10 minutes. The police chief lauded the 911 caller for calling the police instead of just recording what they saw to get their 15 minutes on YouTube. Well, considering that the police have never stepped in to stop these Patriot Front creeps before when they've run rampant elsewhere, maybe Chief White needs to pull his head out of the slop trough and look at his own department. It is a well-known fact that these white supremacist groups have the active support of law enforcement, including police chiefs, and there's members of the police in all of these groups. So it's perfectly understandable that the public doesn't bother to call the police when they see the white supremacists on the march. After all, who expects the fox to guard the henhouse? Now, there might be some simpletons who will try to say that the LGBT community accounts for a disproportionate amount of the tax base relative to their numbers, so that's why the police decided to get on this one lickety-split. Well, black people account for a greater amount of the tax base than the LGBT community does, and yet when these white supremacist gangs are marching through our areas, like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and D.C., the police are nowhere to be found. The public has to take out the trash themselves. As I explained on Sunday, this was not about public safety. The only reason the police got on this is because they wanted to make sure that nobody disturbed the 93% plus white population of Coeur d'Alene. A citizen merely made a phone call and the police were all over these creeps in 10 minutes. I want you to think about that the next time some police rep tries to tell you that the police can't respond to calls in a timely manner or at all due to staffing shortages. The Coeur d'Alene police, who nobody would ever confuse with a major police department, they had their cops out there, sheriff's deputies, and all of them fully decked out in SWAT and tactical gear. They got all of that done in 10 minutes. Hell, as quickly and forcefully as the police responded to this one, you'd have thought that they called the cops on a black person. You always have these anti-black racist people like Marsha Clark. Yeah, she's still salty after all these decades. The Fox News crowd and even Democrats who try to say that, well, white society is the law and order group. They're about law and order, all about law and order. They appreciate the police and they just love the police. Look at what the hell's going on there now. These white supremacist groups, these are the very ones who were waving back the blue flags. And they were the very ones beating the police with those flags last year. And now look at them. They're upping the ante. And the police are now facing the very monster that they enabled, one that a number of them happen to be part of. Got quite the dilemma going on here. How do the brave and highly trained gunmen of the Coeur d'Alene police stop these death threats and harassment? I suggest that they politely ask these white supremacists to stop. Ridiculous, you say? I'm not so sure. Based on what I've seen, the police should be able to appeal to their mutual sense of professional courtesy. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Malik Phillips, Onan Smith, Sabrina, Ogle PB, and Busey. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.